Good evening. Thank you. Please, as you're still just coming in, continue to find seats. There's a few scattered all over the place. You won't interrupt anybody. Just come right on in and have a seat. It is such a pleasure to see all of you here tonight. You know, every year it's like, oh wow, we're getting started with this whole new series, and it's very exciting. This year's series, as you already know, is under the umbrella title of Soar Higher, which is the brand of the Honors College, Pursuing a Life Well Lived. We started off this year with our common read that most of our first-year students participated in, and that focused on the book, The Great Gatsby. And Dr. Joseph Silla from the Literature Program helped us to kick this thing off and to think about what the messages in that book had to do with, or did not have to do with, pursuing a life well lived. And now we're kicking off the STAR Lecture Series, which will consist of 6 different events, one each month for 3 months this fall and 3 months this winter semester, always on a Tuesday, always at 7 o'clock. First half are in here, second half will be in the Hallie Library. You'll see all that information on your program. And we're so excited about it because what's going to happen with this series is we're going to be looking at what does it mean to pursue a life well lived. I mean, most of you, many of you, are college students, and you're here, I think, because you want to have a life well lived. And what does that mean? And what do different disciplines have to tell us about that? In a few moments, I'm going to introduce our speaker, and you're really in for a treat tonight. But for just right now, I wanted to take a couple of moments for some logistics. For the lecture tonight, if you will be so kind as to take your cell phone, if you have it handy, turn it off, and then put it away, unless you're using it to take notes on. If you are, then fine, but you know, please be sure that sound is off. If you have a computer, same thing, you're using it for notes, absolutely, but try to channel your attention this way because it's a little bit distracting, otherwise you don't. For those of you who are brand new to the Student Center, anybody here new to the Student Center? So you know restrooms are out the door to the left, they'll take care of that. You should have received on your chair tonight a program that looks like this. You're going to need it because you'll be doing some writing. Dr. Neff is a professor after all, so she's going to have you doing some writing. And you should have a pink card. And that pink card is going to come in at the very end of the session tonight. We'll use that to track attendance for honors students and also for those of you who are not in the Honors College. If you're here because of LBC credit or whatever, just make a note to that effect. Oh, absolutely. If you did not get a pink card, it looks like we may have a few more. We may have some people in the audience who don't want or need these, but if you don't have a pink card, raise your hand, and John will, oh my goodness, a lot of people don't have pink cards. We want your name. We want STAR Lecture number 1. That's what that is. Your E number. Are you an honor student? And if you are, just check it if you've got the card. If you don't, just write, I'm an honor student. If you're not an honor student, are you doing this for LBC credit? Just tell us, what brought you here so we can be sure you get the right credit. And if there's any questions or anything else you want to ask us, like, I'm not in the Honors College, but I really should be, help, we'll get in touch with you that way. On the back of your card, toward the end of the lecture tonight, there's going to be an opportunity to ask Dr. Neff some questions. Good. She didn't know that, but she's nodding yes. And so if you have a question or two, I'm going to invite you to print it on the back of your card. And when we get to that part of the program, we'll take those up, the questions up, and we'll be sifting those and being sure that as many of them are asked as possible. For everybody, if you don't have a question, we get it early. We'll take these at the very last part of the evening this evening. Let me see, is there anything else that I absolutely have to tell you? One of the things that I want to tell you most about right now is our speaker. Dr. Neff is just one of the most incredible women I know, and I do not say that lightly. I have known her for almost 18 years, since my very first days at Eastern, when I came here from another life in Alaska, doing a whole different kind of job, and started all over as an assistant professor. I have admired her work in many, many different ways. She's one of the most talented women I know. She's a prolific writer. You'll see information about her fiction books in the program. She writes professional literature. She has won more awards than most people would hope to in a lifetime. Her fiction books are used in classes and book clubs all over the place. She's an amazing person in terms of her global citizenship. She did part of her education in Michigan, part of it in Switzerland, part of it in France. You'll see the educational accomplishments, but the most important thing about that global citizenship is I believe she feels equally at home almost everywhere she goes. And that's something that I would strive for every single one of you. Dr. Neff is not only an accomplished literature professor and specialist in African American literature and culture, she is the director of the McNair Scholars Program. Is there anyone in here in the McNair Scholars Program? I'm seeing a hand here and a hand here. If you have questions about that, talk to Dr. Neff after this. That's for students who are headed into PhD programs and meet certain kinds of qualifications, and she'll be glad to give you information on that. Most McNair scholars, by the way, are members of the Honors College, and we work really closely together. Dr. Neff brings a really strong understanding of what it means to be a citizen in our country and in our world today. And she's going to focus her talk tonight on race and racial identities. I have to also say that she is a mom, an amazing mom of a college-age student who just took off for her first week of grad school in London. So this lady knows everything that you're going through and what your parents are going through as well. She's a valued colleague and a wonderful friend. And I hope that you will join me right now in welcoming Dr. Heather Neff. Thank you for joining.
Hey everybody, how are you? This is not going to be one of those things where the speaker comes up and tries to get everybody to go, all right, but how are you doing? That sounds really bad. You know how I'm doing? You really want to know? I got so excited about speaking to you tonight that I forgot to eat dinner. And I was driving over here and I got about 2 blocks from campus and I thought, oh my God, you're going to pass out right in the middle of your speech. So will you guys promise to, like, I don't know, call EMS or something if it gets really bad? I am so pleased to be here. I want to begin really by thanking Dr. Seid. Everything she said is true. We go back to her first days. I remember when she interviewed to come to EMU. And she has had a spectacular career. What she didn't tell you was that the majority of the awards I won, she won them too. And in many cases was sitting right next to me, being awarded right alongside me. And she is really, truly more than a gift to the institution. Those of you who have the privilege of being in the Honors College will discover during your time here at EMU, you have a trusted friend and advisor, and a person who, despite being responsible for really a couple of thousand lives here, still has an interest in each and every one of you on an individual basis. So I hope that you will spend some time getting to know, I know she lets you call her Becky, but Dr. Seid, who is an extraordinary human being. I also want to say that it's really something else to be the first person to launch the 2014-2015 STAR Lecture Series. And as every single one of you knows, when the semester begins and the professor asks that first question, it's really scary to be the first person to put your hand up. So I could be a little scared. And the scariest part of speaking is the moment when you're waiting to come up. You know, you plan it, you get ready, and all the way here, it's cool. And then you're sitting there, and it really kind of freaks you out. But I love a challenge. And tonight, I'm going to talk to you about one of the things that we find most difficult, and in fact, unspeakable in American culture. And that's the issue of race. However, I'm not going to do this by myself. At several points in my remarks tonight, I'm going to ask you to actively participate. So you're going to need a pen and pencil, something to write on, and I would strongly recommend that you just take the program and open it up and use the free page inside to keep some empty space if you're taking notes so that when it's your turn to respond, you'll be able to do so. So let's get ready to do this. I call this Beyond black and white, how concepts of racial identity create, sustain, and complicate American identity. So there are several things. Let's have you all work with me and open the front page and look at page 2 of your program. Are you with me? Okay, here we go. Following what's written here on the inside, this is called an abstract. And it is, if you will, a short kind of abbreviated form of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to start by breaking the abstract down into 5 questions. Here we go. Point 1. Race is generally understood as a socially constructed system used to classify individuals according to physical appearance and genealogical descent. That's point 1 of my remarks tonight. Point 2. In the United States, however, race has historically created social divisions that assign status and levels of privilege to citizens and non-citizens alike. Point 3. Why does race continue to be such a critical marker of individual identity? Question 4. Why do so many people find race more important than one's religion, ethnicity, or level of wealth? And finally, how does American culture profit from convincing us that we're different? So now you know what we're going to talk about tonight. Here we go. So now I'm going to ask all of you to engage in an exercise. I need all of you on point, all of you ready to go. I'm going to ask you to write some things down. So are you ready? You got your pens, you got your paper. Here we go. We're going to start with a role play. Okay? Let's pretend that the Earth finally manages to make contact with another planet. And I'm going to call that planet Alpha Centauri. Now, if you were my age, and Dr. Seid and perhaps Mr. Rice remember this, we all watched a TV show when we were little called Lost in Space. And it was about an American family on a spaceship that get lost in space. And they're on their way to Alpha Centauri. And all my life, I've kind of had this fantasy thing about Alpha Centauri. So for purposes of our role play this evening, we're going to pretend that we finally made contact with Alpha Centauri. And now we're going to try to communicate with our new friends through an intergalactic translator that was developed by, of course, Mr. Spock. So let's imagine that you are introducing yourself to someone on Alpha Centauri. And I would begin, let's just pretend it's me, and I would begin by saying, hello, my name is Heather Neff, and I'm a... So, this is where I'm starting to need your help. I'd like for you to tell me some of the identifying markers I might use in my introduction of myself. So I'm going to need some hands to go up, and you tell me, hello, I'm Heather Neff. What am I? I'm a human. Well, you know what? People on Alpha Centauri have never seen a human. So what is that? That's not going to help much. Okay, I'm a human. What else am I? I'm a friend. I'm a black, and I'm a woman. You're a who? You're black metal. I'm bipedal. Okay, good. Bipedostalus. Okay? Is that it? Black woman, American, human, what else am I?
Professor.
Okay, so what would you say? Let's say you're introducing yourselves. Let me hear some more stuff. No, you're not professors. You're not like women, most of you. So come on now, what are you?
Hungry.
Hungry, me too. Me too. I'm a hungry black woman, professor, human, bipedal. Okay, what else are you? Yeah, this is really boring so far. Come on. Yes, sir. Mr. Ty. Pardon me? Okay, I'm an earthling. What else? Sir. I'm a citizen. Okay, what else? Dang, they don't even want to get to know you. You're the most boring people I ever heard. What else are you? I'm artistic. What else am I? What are you? Yes, dear, pink shirt.
Amazing.
That's an adjective. I want to know concretely, what are you?
Extremely attractive.
Okay, what are you? Yeah, I want to know what you are. A what? A student, okay. Man, you guys are so generic. Seriously. I haven't heard anything that tells me anything about what makes you different from anybody else in this room. Is that really how it is? I could buy a package of you like an egg carton. Okay, let me hear something that differentiates you from the person sitting next to you. Yes, sir. I'm a barber or hairstylist. What are you? Yes, young lady.
Musician?
I'm a musician. What kind?
Well, I play piano.
I'm a pianist. And I'm a ukuleleist. Okay, what else? You're a programmer. A youper. What else? Ooh, I see some eggs out there. Well, I'm left-handed. I'm an Aquarian. What sign are you? Right? What sign are you? Okay, so you have 10 seconds. Each and every one of you has 10 seconds to write a phrase in which you introduce yourself to the good people of Alpha Centauri. Here we go, now. Okay, time's up. Stop writing. Oh, now you've thought of a bunch of stuff, right? Okay, I want to hear you introduce yourselves. Who is brave enough to tell me, I'm Alpha Centauri, tell me who you are? Like I said, it's hard to be the first. Yes, sir.
Do you just want what I have in the 10 seconds?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Dallas. I'm extremely attractive.
You know, the thing is, on Alpha Centauri, they might look like, I don't know, slugs.
Takes a
And they
little
might look
longer
at
to
you and
write.
think, oh, so do you look like a slug like we do? Is that what makes you attractive? Okay. Let's hear another one. Yes, dear.
Hello, I'm Beatrice Smith, and I'm a queen.
Oh, I'm a queen. Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Amion, and I'm agnostic.
I'm agnostic, okay. Another one. Yes, sir.
I'm me. Pleasure to meet you.
What does that mean?
I'm me. I don't really know what else to say.
Well, that's okay. So you don't know who you are yet. That's fine. Yes, dear. That's fine. Yes, dear. In the back. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm Nyasha, I'm intelligent, and I'm respectful.
Very good. Anybody else? Well, how many of you, when you think about introducing yourselves, begin with your race? How many of you, if you were introducing yourself to someone who never met you before, would think in terms of, I'm a black woman? Because that's what someone introduced me as in the front. I don't remember who it was. Why, Anthony, did you lead off with black woman? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm perfectly okay with it. But why?
I was thinking of different things you are.
Okay. Anybody else here would think in terms first of race? Would you think first of nationality? Would your first thought be, I'm an American? How many would start with, I'm an American? I see a few hands going up. How many would start with, I'm tall? No one. Oh, one, are you tall?
Yeah.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact is that all human cultures have developed identifying markers to organize societies into groups with distinctive customs, practices, social and religious beliefs, and rights of membership. Different cultures establish distinctive markers of group identity. Some cultures are very interested in socioeconomic status as a divider. Others divide their people by religious belief. And some even create social divisions by ancestry. And that might be, for example, in the Native community, where being a Cherokee or a Sioux is very important. or in some African communities where being Yoruba or being Igbo is very important. In the United States, our greatest social divider is race. So let me give you an example. I grew up in Ohio and in Michigan. I went to the University of Michigan. I left Ann Arbor an angry person, and I moved to live in Paris, in France. I lived in France for 2 years, returned to the United States, and then went to live in Switzerland, where I pursued a master's and a doctoral degree. I was there for 10 years, and then went to live in the Caribbean and the Virgin Islands, where I taught at a university before moving back to Switzerland and eventually being offered a job in Ypsilanti. I was glad to move back here because my family was here, but even more importantly, because I had a child. And of all the places in the world that I've lived and traveled, bringing a child up in America seemed the right thing for me. Now, when I lived in France, many people, including black people, would have this discussion with me. Ah, bonjour madame, qu'est-ce que vous êtes vous? Hello lady, what are you? And I would say, mais moi, je suis noire américaine. I'm black American. To which the French person would inevitably say, mais non, mais c'est pas vrai, vous n'êtes pas noir. But that's not true, you are not black. And I would say, bien sûr que je suis noire. J'étais noire toute ma vie était placée sur le fait que je suis noire. All of my life has been influenced, has been determined by the fact that I'm black. And the French person would say, mais non, mais ici, vous êtes pas noir. Ici, vous êtes américaine. Here in France, you are not black. Here in France, you are American. Now, I found that really frustrating. Because so much of my identity was tied up in my concept of myself as a racial being. Yes, being a woman was a given. But my identity as a black person determined how I thought about the world. It determined how I responded to material in my classes. It determined how I interacted with other people. In my mind, it determined my unique identification with a larger group of people. Now remember, black Americans cannot trace their ancestry back to a country. Black Americans cannot say, I'm Scottish, therefore. I'm Irish, therefore. I'm Italiano, therefore. I love pasta. I'm Italian, right? We can't do that. Because part of the legacy of what we are as a people is that we are people who were stolen from our homes. So for many black Americans, the sense of whatever it means to be black, and that's a shifty and tricky concept, what it means to be black, but that becomes the stand-in for the national identity that European Americans count on as being their identifying marker. So when I got to France and people started saying, no, vous êtes pas noir, I was like, what are you telling me I'm not black? Of course I'm black. And I didn't know what to do with the fact that they insisted that me being American meant more than me being black. Then I met my husband, and he was from Switzerland. Woo! Switzerland. So when I met Marcel, I'd get mad at him sometimes and I'd say, Marcel, you're acting like a white man. And Marcel would look at me and say, Heather, I am Swiss. My language is Swiss. My food is Swiss. I went to Swiss schools and I love Swiss chocolate. What do you even mean when you tell me I'm white? Wow. Maybe I began to think, my idea of what race is really determined only by the framework of America. When I was a doctoral student at the University of Zurich, I often went in the library, this old library, and just hung out. I don't know about you, but if you're a person like me who loves to learn things and loves books, there's nothing I enjoy more than going in a library and pulling a book down from the shelf and just chilling, like hiding and reading. And one day I was in the library and I pulled a book off the shelf. It was a book I'd heard of a bunch of times and never read before, called The Souls of Black Folk. It was written in 1903 by a sociologist, historian, and journalist named William Edward Burghardt Dubois, who just happens to be the first African American to graduate from Harvard with a doctoral degree. He was America's first PhD. In this book, he wrote the following paragraph, and I'm reading this to you for one specific reason. When I was in Zurich, I was still angry. I mean, I left Ann Arbor angry. I was angry all the way through France, angry all the way through Switzerland. And I couldn't describe the anger. I couldn't understand my anger. But it's an anger that I guarantee you many people on this campus are struggling with at this moment, in this student center, maybe even in this room. And when I read this paragraph, something happened to me. It was like the top of my head blew off, because I was reading words that had been written 100 years before by a man who was already dead. Well, here's what he said. He said, "Black people in America possess a double consciousness." In his words, a sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a black, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one black body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being ripped apart. In the Zürcher Bibliothek, in the Zurich Library, I read those words on a hot summer afternoon with the sun streaming in through a window. And I suddenly understood why I was angry. I understood that the black part of me often felt rejected by the American part of me, but I also understood that I was really proud to be an American. And that it was very difficult for me to reconcile that war between the part of me that wanted to be accepted and loved by America and the part of me that was always an outsider in America. And to hear that through the words of someone else gave me the solace of understanding I wasn't nuts and I wasn't alone. And as he put it, I was strong. Because if I wasn't strong, I would not be here today. So each and every one of you who feels anger, understand, you're not nuts, and you're really quite strong. So, I ask you this, has my American identity, my black American identity, meant that I always will be two separate beings at war within this one life? So understand this. Race is generally understood as a socially constructed system used to classify individuals by what? Physical appearance? And genealogical descent? How freaking random is that? So let's take that apart. First, race is a socially constructed system. What in the world does that mean? Help, I need a hand. A socially constructed system. How is race a socially constructed system? Help me, please. Yes, dear, yes. It's a man-made system. So race doesn't just exist. It's made by man. Another comment? A socially constructed system. Yes, dear.
It only has power and effect on people because society gives it power.
Society gives it effect. Any other questions or comments? Any other points right here? Yes, sir. I can't hear you. Really? Come on.
It kind of favors us to go along with people of our own race without investigating that person, knowing who they really are.
So part of the social construction of race is because it's built into the society in which we live. We go along with it, and we don't question it. Okay, here we go. We're going to start questioning right now. Some years ago, I traveled to the Dominican Republic. Anybody ever been there? have even one person on vacation? Me too. Anybody else? Okay, here we go. The Dominican Republic is an independent nation located on the Caribbean island called Hispaniola. Right next door, on the very same island, is the independent nation called Haiti. Many of you have heard of Haiti. And just because it's so important, I want to give you a little bit of the historical background of Hispaniola. Now listen carefully, because this is going to be important in my story. The island of Hispaniola was the location of Christopher Columbus's first permanent colony in the New World. That's where our culture began. And it is also the site from which Columbus, in service to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, began the conquest of the Americas. It also happens to be the site from which Christopher Columbus began the transatlantic slave trade, which is the economic phenomenon that's responsible for all the black people in this room. Africans, because of Christopher Columbus, were shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to work on sugar plantations, but only after Columbus's Spanish soldiers had engaged in a genocide that wiped out the overwhelming majority of the indigenous Caribbean people. There were two major tribes, the Arawak and the Carib. Hence we have the word Caribbean. These were the Native American people who lived there who now are nearly extinct. Of course, that lecture is for another day. I have to just stick this point in. Every time we celebrate Columbus Day, we are celebrating the wiping out of an entire race of people, and we are celebrating the transatlantic slave trade. To the best of my knowledge, only one nation in the New World, and that would be Venezuela. No, maybe it's one state, has recently changed their rule, and now they actually have taken Columbus Day down, and they call it the Day of the Indigenous People. And they're trying to give honor to the people who were murdered by Columbus. The eastern half of Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic, remained in the control of Spain in the ensuing centuries. And in the Dominican Republic, listen carefully, the majority of the people are of mixed Spanish and African descent, meaning that the people range in color from very white-skinned to coffee and cream, to honey, to caramel, to light milk chocolate. There is, however, a minority of people in the Dominican Republic who are black-skinned, and they're more than likely of pure African descent. These people tend to constitute the poorest, the lowest class of citizens, and they work as servants, they clean, or, and it's kind of horrifying when you're there, they beg on the beaches. Now, the western half of Hispaniola, by contrast, was under the control of the French. Most of the French landowners did not live in Haiti. They sent agents to run the sugar plantations, so there was much less racial mixing, which is why the majority of Haitians remain black people of pure African descent. Here's where it gets interesting. In the late 1700s, a black ruler rose up in Haiti named Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint, which means all saints. Toussaint Louverture. He fought Napoleon's army, defeated Napoleon, and Haiti became the first independent nation of black people in the Western world. Now you know that Haiti has struggled under a series of dictators, has suffered a number of devastating earthquakes, and many of the people have been afflicted by HIV/AIDS, which did not begin in Haiti, was instead brought to the island by sex tourism. So the island is at present, unfortunately, the poorest country in the Western world. So the Dominican Republic is rich because we go on vacation there. Haiti, right next door, is desperately poor. So here we are. I'm on vacation. During my visit to the Dominican Republic, my husband and I stayed in a compound on the beach with like 4 or 5 swimming pools, all-you-can-eat buffets, white sandy beaches. Beaches are amazing, aren't they? And these elegant palm trees everywhere, because palm trees are really utterly beautiful. They are beautiful trees. All of the guests, because I was traveling with a Swiss tourist group, were white European or Canadian, with the exception of moi. And when I was at the hotel, there were a number of Dominican young men who were hired to come every day and kind of run the sports activities, and then they would do merengue lessons at night, you know. And it was so cute, the tourists would get up and try to move their hips, it was darling. And then of course there'd be karaoke, because by that time of night people are drunk and they'll just do anything. So one day, I found myself talking to one of these activity leaders, a young Dominican man. He was about my color, he had thickly coiled African hair, and he had typical African-American features, nose, lips, you know, he's a black man. So we talked about the hotel, we talked about his job, we talked about the tourists, and then, you know, we worked our way around to talking about race. And I said to him, so, what is it like being black in the Dominican Republic? And he said, oh my God, it's just terrible for black people. And I said, oh, really? He said, yes, I am so glad I'm not black. I'm like, really? I'm thinking I'm hearing the guy wrong. I mean, he's actually a Spanish-speaking guy, and maybe, you know, we had a mistranslation. So I said, what, you're not black? And he said, oh, God, no. And I said, so, like, what are you? And he said, I'm white. Now, at first, I'm really confused, right? I'm thinking the guy's spending so much time around tourists that he's just like, you know, I'm identifying with them, right? Not the guys on the beach. Then I thought maybe he was just having a go at me, you know, making a joke. So I got, you know, irritated, and I just stayed away from him for the rest of the vacation. Oh, this guy's a jerk. But it kind of bugged me. So I went home, I got on the internet, and I started reading up on the Dominican Republic. Imagine my surprise when I learned that at the time I visited the island, the president, who was of mixed Spanish descent, realized that the best way to get elected and to stay in power was to get the majority of the people to vote for him, which meant it was really important to get that mixed race vote. So the way he did it was to bring out legislation that said, if you were of mixed race, you were white. Which meant that all the coffee, cream, honey, caramel, and milk chocolate people were going to vote white, leaving that minority of black cleaners, janitors, and beggars to be the lowest racial class. The kid wasn't lying. The kid was white. And I tell you this story to show how race is a political creation. That in the Dominican Republic, a president created race and used it to assure his political power. Now, let's talk about America. In the United States, and we're now down to only point 2, but we're going to get through this. Race has historically created social divisions that assign status and levels of privilege to citizens and non-citizens alike. I'm going to argue this evening that racial identity in our country has historically been driven by economic need. Early in the settling of the 13 original colonies, African slavery was introduced as a means of supporting the economy, because we all know a slave is nothing more than free labor. And although it is rarely discussed in the history books, African slaves, here we go, listen carefully, students who are like, I'm white, I don't care. Listen to me, because I can see it in your faces. You're looking at me, hey, I'm looking at you, right? Understand that African slaves in the 13 original colonies toiled alongside white slaves